Right, I've been meaning to get around to this one for a long time. It's nice to cover something more modern for an older system like the Spectrum, and these two games here, well, they may be two of the very best newer Speccy games that I've seen. Hell, maybe they're all-time greats. And they're frickin' Aliens games too. The first Aliens Neoplasma game certainly set fire to a good few arses when it was released back in 2019, and 5 years down the road, well, we've got a sequel. Aliens Neoplasma 2 has been available since May, and with that coming out I thought it was high time I looked at both of them because, well, once again the quality of these new games never ceases to amaze. The scenes for computers like the Spectrum, the C64, the CPC and the Amiga are all far healthier now than they were at the end of these machines' respective commercial periods, and it seems like every other week there's something new and awesome to look at. New games that you want to shout about and say to everyone that they should bloody well play it now. So that's what I'm doing. Obviously we should start off with the first title. Aliens Neoplasma came out in early 2019, and it's a project by one of the best known groups of heads in the whole Speccy scene, the Sanchez crew. Sanchez is a multinational group. In the main it's partly Russian and partly Ukrainian, with the main Russian trio consisting of designer and coder Alexander Sanchez Udatov, graphics designer Evgeny Ragulin, and musician Oleg Nikitin. Ukraine's Yevgeny Sohomlin is the crew's executive producer, and you may know him from the excellent Sinc LAIR channel here on YouTube. As for the Sanchez crew's works, you may know them from various other exceptional modern projects. Udatov first came to serious attention in 2015 for his work on the modern classic Castlevania Spectral Interlude. They released their take on Mighty Final Fight for the Spectrum in 2020, that is probably the best beat-em-up for the system, and they're also responsible for Delta's Shadow, a game that takes inspiration from the NES title Power Blade. That's on both the regular Spectrum and the Spectrum Next, as well as Treasure Hunters, which is a Next exclusive. As you can see, consoles are very much the main muse for the Sanchez crew, particularly the NES, although it would be more accurate to say that these guys grew up and got their start in gaming by playing that most famous of clone systems, the Dendy, before also getting their start on any one of many ZX Spectrum clones. When interviewed by Paul Davis for Crash magazine in 2021, Sohomlin said that basically every city in the USSR had its own version of the Speccy, some of which were terrible, but some of which were even more advanced than the originals. The funny thing about Aliens Neoplasma is that it pretty much started out as a side project. It's made using the same engine that powers Delta's Shadow, and was, like several other projects including Mighty Final Fight, worked on by the Sanchez crew at the same time that they were working on Delta's Shadow as their main title. And so, while Delta's Shadow took around about 3 years to develop from beginning to end, the original Aliens Neoplasma was actually only knocked up in all of a few weeks. It was then entered in that year's ZXDev MIA Remakes contest, with the pitch that there had been various unfinished projects over the years that were set in the Aliens universe, and this was an attempt to rectify that, their own fantasy of a ZX Spectrum Aliens-based game. Aliens Neoplasma would go on to win the competition, and even if it was only a short project, it set a lot of tongues wagging. Cause hey, it's a new Aliens game on the ZX Spectrum in 2019. Certainly something a little bit different to those age-old Electric Dreams titles, that's for sure. Rather than directly putting you in the shoes of Ellen Ripley, Aliens Neoplasma decides to tell its own original story where you play as a medical lieutenant named Ashley Smith on a spaceship called Achilles that's shuttling colonists and materials from the Hadley's Hope settlement back to Earth. The ship's computer wakes you from hypersleep and tells you to head over to the captain's quarters for an important meeting. There's just one small fly in the ointment. The captain and everyone else are dead. And there's a whole load of xenomorphs and facehuggers roaming the ship. Other than that, well, everything's just great. As you go through the game, you'll find out more and more about the situation and just what the Achilles computer has to do with this mess, while taking down as many of these monsters as you can. Simple enough, really. The game plays like a classic sort of platformer, quite similar in many ways to the 16-bit titles in the series like Alien 3 on the Mega Drive and SNES, and of course, seeing as it uses the same engine as Delta's Shadow, it obviously plays a lot like that game. It's a pretty fast-paced title, and it uses flick screen as opposed to any scrolling. When it comes to Aliens games, obviously we've got to talk about the atmosphere. Does this have that same ever-present sense of dread that you get from the films and the best of the Aliens games, the AVPs and the isolations and what have you? And the answer is undoubtedly yes. This is most certainly dark enough to give you the sort of feeling that pulls you in immediately. Being flick screen is something that really works in this game's favour. When you think back to the first time you watched those classic Aliens movies, you never knew what was coming next. Sure, when it comes to the second film in particular, you knew that the xenomorphs were all over the shop, but they could come from absolutely anywhere, through the frickin' walls and so on. And you get that here too. Every new screen comes with that little bit of suspense, that bit of dread, as you wonder what you're going to be up against next. The game handles ammo pretty well too. There's refilling stations for both your guns and grenades as well as your health, but you can only have a maximum of 100 bullets and 10 grenades. If you're not too trigger happy, that should be just about enough to get to the next one, but it's easy to expend too much firepower if you find yourself in a panicky situation. You often get these parts where you've just got a few bullets and a couple of screens to go, you hope anyway, and you have to pick your shots so carefully. Hell, even try to avoid the Xenos completely if it comes down to it, and that's highly appreciated. And what about those enemies? Well, you've got the standard xenomorph, and you've got facehuggers. If a xenomorph catches you, you're dead, at which point you'll respawn at the last computer terminal you visited. If you can get distance between yourself and the Xenos, they're actually not too hard to deal with. After all, they do just run straight forward and you can take them out with your pulse rifle. Oftentimes, the facehuggers are actually a much more dangerous enemy. Although they die in one hit, they'll usually come out when you're not expecting it, filling up a previously empty screen with threats. They love to attack in confined spaces, and they love to attack in swarms. It's possible to shake off one facehugger if they do get you. However, if more than one reach you, then you're almost certainly screwed. This is something I hugely appreciate about Neoplasma. When it comes to Aliens games, the facehuggers are normally the most useless enemy of the lot. They die very quickly, and they're usually pretty easy to deal with. So long as you've got distance, it's not a problem at all blasting them. Not so here. I actually died a lot more to the facehuggers than I died to the xenomorphs, because the speed and variety of their movement and attack makes them so much more dangerous, especially when they're running interference as you're trying to make your way through some sort of platforming sequence. At last, the egg-laying scum have been given some virtual flowers, which does make a change to how they're normally treated. As for the platforming and the general moving, fumbling and thrashing about, well, that is absolutely solid. The controls work fine whether you're using a keyboard or a gamepad. Sanchez recommend a Mega Drive style pad for this one because you have 3 buttons for shooting, jumping and grenades respectively. If you're on keyboard, the game defaults to WASD for the movement and BN and M for the functions. That's perfectly fine for me, and I was easily able to get through the game using the keys. Again, it's very similar to what you would find in Delta's Shadow. You get a lot of nice little sequences, often packing a fair bit of movement into a single screen. Floor fans are one of the main traps. If you fall on these while they're moving, then you will get completely gipped. However, they can be stopped temporarily with a well-placed grenade. Indeed, this is what grenades mainly get used for, rather than dealing with enemies. There may be the odd moment where a grenade proves handy, especially as you can drop them down from a ladder, but in the main, you use them for these fans. As previously mentioned, you often have to watch out for facehuggers in these sequences too. It's not always going to be plain sailing. Even doors become something of a threat as you go through the game. They start to malfunction, opening and shutting, and they will crush you. That said, it is satisfying if you ever get the chance to splatter a xenomorph or a facehugger by using a door, Space Crusade style. There's a fair bit to be getting on with, and it's all represented beautifully. The art style is glorious. This is another instance where the high contrast of the Speccy works so well, plenty of light and shade, the odd subtle use of the good old colour clash. It's like an evolution of some of the best looking classic Speccy titles, the likes of Rex or Dan Dare. It feels very alive, with loads of great detail. And of course, there is a nice heart pumping tune to go along with it all, exactly what you want in a game like this. In the end, Aliens Neoplasma doesn't exactly leave people with a lot to complain about. It does just about everything brilliantly. For fans of the films, it is a stunning recreation of that signature atmosphere that's condensed down into 128K, and for everyone else, it's an excellent classic sort of action platformer, one that you can't help but fall in love with immediately. It is bloody fantastic, both here and also on the Spectrum Next. The next version, which came out in late 2022, does feature smoother movement and plenty more colour in the graphics, but still keeps faithful to the regular Speccy version in most regards. In the end, picking either the regular version or the next version as your favourite is mainly going to be down to personal preference. If there's one thing that could be said about Neoplasma, it's that it leaves you hungry for more. The game consists of one pretty big level, and it does feature 2 different endings, which is absolutely fine for the minimum of $3 that it costs to buy. But yeah, it'd be great to have an even bigger game, wouldn't it? Obviously, when something's this damn good, you want more. And now, in 2024, there is more. May 2024 saw the release of the long-awaited sequel, Aliens Neoplasma 2. This time, the game has been released simultaneously on both the regular Spectrum and the Next. As with the original title, it's available on Sinc LAIR's page, this time costing $8 minimum. Obviously there's links in the description, but the higher price point does mean that there's a lot more game to be getting on with. Neoplasma 2 follows immediately on from the events of the first game. After escaping Achilles, Lieutenant Ashley Smith's pod is recovered by Weyland-Yutani and sent to a secret laboratory. Once again, she's aroused from her sleep in the cryo chamber, and it soon becomes pretty clear that she's not going to be getting a hero's welcome. The sensitive nature of what happened on the ship means that she's got little else except a prison cell to look forward to. And so, the hunt is on again, this time to see just what Weyland-Yutani are up to. Not only will you be up against their security, but naturally you can expect to be taking on more familiar foes. This time there's 3 pretty damn large levels, complete with boss fights and whatnot, so yes, you do get a lot more here. Indeed, the release of Neoplasma 2 does reposition the original title as something akin to a prelude, with this being the full experience. Obviously you should go ahead and play both. From the tense beginning where you're armed with nothing but a screwdriver and you're trying to avoid the guards, to the finale deep inside the scientific and technical facilities, I have to say that this is one of the greatest Speccy games I have ever played. If I were to redo my Speccy list, then this would easily be in the top 10, if not top 5. While in many ways it's more of the same thing that you already had in the first Neoplasma, with a lot of the same mechanics such as only being limited to a certain amount of ammo, or essentially splitting the levels up into computer terminals that give you more dialogue and access to new areas, it's a lot more than that. The Sanchez crew really get creative with the action sequences and the platforming, offering a lot more variation on that front and a lot of new challenges. It is certainly a tougher game than the original, although the difficulty is never what you would call unfair, and death merely takes you back to the last terminal. There's no live system or anything like that. It must be said, those terminals do add quite a lot to the game. We do have a fair bit of plot here, certainly more than you would find in your average ZX Spectrum action game, and it's mostly done through dialogue between Lieutenant Smith and the computer AI. It is perhaps not a surprise that the rogue AI from the Achilles ended up escaping the doomed ship with you, but you'll have to work together in this sequel in order to figure out just what's going on and to make your way through this laboratory. This amount of plot is pretty welcome, and it breaks up the action nicely. And again, there is a lot more to that action in the sequel. It's not as if the original Neoplasma wasn't brilliant to begin with, but you're going to need all of your wits here. Xenomorphs can often be found in tricky positions where they won't just run straight at you, and instead may be hanging from the ceiling or waiting to pounce from a ledge. The guards themselves present their own problems with their positioning and can happily kill you with one shot if they get a drop on you, and the facehuggers are just as deadly as they were in the first title. Being a Speccy game, the movements of enemies are very set and there's no artificial intelligence as such, but the game does a lot to make those movements a tough job to deal with, and that's down to some mighty fine design. A Again, you often have to deal with these threats at the same time as you're trying to deal with some sort of jumping sequence and the like, and here there's plenty more to be concerned about than floor fans and blasts of steam. There's all sorts of lifts and rickety platforms, conveyor belts, reactor blasts, and other obstacles, more than enough so that these sequences don't get old easily, and the game doesn't ever feel as though it's repeating itself, more like it's gradually stretching you further and further. There's also the boss fights, which is always something nice to see on the Speccy. You get 3 of these, and while they can be short, they work well, and the final boss is an appropriately tough showdown. And of course, there's the art. The style hasn't changed too much from the original, but then it was already great. And here we've got just the right improvements in detail and additions, even more great use of colour, a lovely mix of monochrome sprites and colourful backgrounds with, again, just the right amount of colour clash here and there. It definitely feels like a journey, 3 separate levels, all of which have their own identity. And they all have their own piece of music too. And again, that music is very nice indeed. In the end, well, I can't recommend this game enough. I started playing it and couldn't really put it down until I'd finished it about an hour or 2 later. It is kind of cliche and in truth silly at this point to say that if a game like this came out back in the day, that it would absolutely blow people's minds. This is enough to blow people's minds now, and it's not exactly an uncommon occurrence in the microcomputer scenes these days. Both Neoplasma 1 and 2 are right up there when it comes to being amongst the best Speccy games of the 21st century, joining a list of newer gems that's growing ever longer, to a point where it's starting to look pretty good compared to the lists of old classics that we all know and love. Brilliance like these games simply cannot be ignored. Neoplasma 2 does close out not just with the novelty of seeing a QR code in Spectrum form, but also with the tease of another sequel, presumably something that'll close out the trilogy. And with the quality of these games, not to mention the quality of damn near everything else that the Sanchez crew have done up to this point, I already can't wait for it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little video review, and until the next time, bye for now.